Good.
Indiana football.
Or football, right?
Yeah. Not basketball.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the RTA's meeting of its Board of Directors. Just want to review a couple guidelines for the meeting. For the members who are here in person, thank you for braving the cold. Please turn your microphones on when you wish to speak and off when you are finished, so we limit the mics that are on to only one at a time. I'll call on those persons with questions or comments for those attending in person. For those calling in remotely, keep your audio on mute as much as possible because we record these meetings and we want as minimal background noise as possible. When you have a question or comment, if you're remote, raise your virtual hand and the board secretary will call on board members who have raised their hands one at a time. When she calls on you and you are finished, try to remember to lower your hand and also unmute yourself before speaking. With that said, I will now officially call the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Regional Transportation Authority to order. And will everyone here who is able, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the state. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Always like that. It's like being back in grade school or elementary school. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Good morning, everyone. Director Alvarez, Director Carey. Here. Director Colson. Here. Director Gorman. Here. Director Groven.
Here.
Director Jenkins. Here. Clark.
Here.
Dr. Lewis.
Here.
Dr. Mondero. Dr. Rotondo.
Here.
Dr. Ross.
Here.
Director Ryan. Here. Dr. Sager. Dr. Snoika.
Here.
Dr. Walker. And Chairman Dillard.
Present.
We have 12 present.
So we have a physical quorum, and the board secretary has received completed notices from directors Groven and Ross indicating that they cannot attend in person. And pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, they're going to be deemed admitted by me unless there's any objections. Seeing no objections, they are admitted. Item 3 is our first action item for today. It's the approval of the minutes from the board meeting we had on December 18th of the last year, 2025. Any comments or questions? If not, Joey, number one, add Director Walker to the roll. And how about a motion and a second on approving the minutes? Director Lewis moves, Director Ryan seconds. We approve item 3 of the minutes from our last board meeting. And with that, Madam Secretary, please take the roll.
Director Alvarez, Director Carey.
Here.
Dr. Colson. Director Colson.
Aye.
Dr. Gorman. Dr. Groven.
Aye.
Dr. Jenkins.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Dr. Lewis.
Yes.
Dr. Mondero. Dr. Rotondo.
Yes.
Dr. Ross.
Yes.
Dr. Ryan.
Yes.
Dr. Snoika.
Aye.
Dr. Walker.
Yes.
And Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
We have 13 ayes.
And those are approved. Thank you. Item 4 is the public comment segment of the meeting, and any comments received by the board secretary will be read into the record by the board secretary. Joey, do we have any written comments for today?
We've received no written comments.
Okay, no written comments. I think we have a couple of people or 3 people signed up to speak from the audience. I don't know who has the list or who's first.
Sure. Stephen?
Good morning, Stephen.
Mr. Chairman. My name is Stephen Hyatt Leonard. I'm just here today to get an update on the new certification process with the new agency and to ensure that the certification process stays the same, because I know individuals who have a very difficult time trying to apply for services, and I just want to make sure everything is streamlined. But thank you for your incredible work. In addition to the rideshare access program as well, where does that stand in terms of RTA funding? Thank you.
Thank you, and we will have an update, and Stephen, Peter Kirsten is here, who I'm sure will be happy to talk with you off meeting as well on that particular very important topic to us all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
Joey, who's next?
Amber?
Amber. Good morning, and thank you for being here.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, so as just so people know, my name is Amber Smock, and I'm the Vice President of Advocacy for Access Living. I showed up at this meeting last fall because a number of people with disabilities were very upset about the RAP and TAP program and what was going to happen to that. I'm here today just to give something of an update, but also a reminder. First, I want to thank Leanne and the RTA staff for working very closely with Access Living over the last few months to address this. We also heard through Leanne that the board was very concerned about the situation. So I just want to say thank you to all of you who expressed concern and said, you know, we have to take a closer look at putting a cap on RAP and TAP rights. So thank you for that. You should know that if you weren't already aware that this particular program was of much interest to state legislators who often cited it as a reason why we needed to make sure that the transit system as a whole got funded. So it was a very nice wedge issue in terms of fighting for funding for transportation. And we did send even some of those same advocates that you saw at the board meeting down to Springfield to express their concerns about RAP and TAP. So I just want everybody to know that we've been very heavily engaged on it. We are very thankful for the partnership and also really the heavy research that RTA staff have done to try to come to a resolution on this matter. That being said, I also want to point out that, you know, Access Living, as you are probably aware, has been very consistent over the last 40 years, basically saying, you know, people with disabilities need good options for transportation. And people with disabilities need to be not stuck at home and trapped at home. And they need to be able to get to and from medical appointments. They need to do their work, go to school, you know, things like that. So it's really coming from that standpoint that I'm making a reminder that as you go forward and you work on RAP and TAP, that there really needs to be an appeal option for the 30 ride cap. And that appeal option needs to be something that is kind of a relatively low bar. The reason why is because there are so many other points of government programs where people with disabilities have to do a lot of work to prove that they're disabled, you know, things like that. But it shouldn't take a lot to express to the RTA that I need more than 30 rides a month because my job requires it. You know, I mean, I need to be able to get to and from places, and regular paratransit is not going to work for me. Or they should be able to say, because my disability, even though paratransit is supposed to be the accessible option, it's not the kind of access that I need, right? There are other kinds of situations that people have where they're using RAP and TAP. And for example, medical appointments. How many of you know when your medical appointment is going to wrap up? I mean, people do not know. And sometimes your doctor keeps you on to talk and, you know, all this stuff. Or things get delayed and you just don't know when you're going to leave. So you need an on-demand option to be able to go home when it's time to go home instead of your paratransit ride shows up and they leave because you weren't there. So I just want to say that that's what I hope you all will pay attention to. As you know, we will continue to work with Leanne and with the RTA to figure out, okay, so are there ways to fund this? Are there ways to make this happen? But there are literally people who need more of an exception type process. And again, without such a high bar that it's impossible to secure. Finally, I just want to say that I have several staff that I need to do their jobs. And they need to be able to do community outreach, visit local community sites. They are some of the people who rely on, especially the rideshare access program. They need to be able to like drop off, spend an hour at whatever organization, get picked up, bounce over to another part of town. I mean, that is literally part of their jobs, but they are disabled users of RAP and TAP. and I need my staff to do their job. This also applies actually to Access Living CEO Karen Tamley, who is on vacation. She conveys her regards to all of you. But Karen is also somebody that sometimes she is using really is rap. Needs to be able to bounce from one thing to another. If you're a CEO, you got things to do. You don't have time to wait around for your paratransit ride to show up. So I just want to flag this for all of you going forward. I realize that nobody's taking action on this kind of thing today, but it is something very important, and I think it's also consistent with RTA's general commitment through the transition to the NEDA to make sure that people with disabilities have reasonable access to public transportation. So, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amber, and thanks for your input. It's very valuable. Appreciate it.
And we have one more, Mike Archie.
Yeah. Hi, Mr. Archie. Come on up, Michael.
Thank you. Good morning, RTA board and staff. My name is Mike Archie. I work in the energy and carbon management space. I'm an Illinois citizen, taxpayer, and transit user. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. This is the third time I've addressed this body in the past 13 months. I hope this time is a charm. I know we are in the RTA need a transition. As such, I have an immediate call to action for you. PACE and CTA are about to commit $189 million of taxpayer-funded CapEx to hybrid buses. They call them hybrid electric, but they're diesel-propelled buses. They're doing this, committing this funding without proper and customary due diligence. I'm asking this board through authority or influence, please stay any commitments to hybrid buses until a robust and comprehensive comparative analysis of all low, no emission bus technologies have been conducted. To this end, and I know questions are frowned upon in public comments, but I'll rhetorically ask you, how many people in this room has seen a comparative bus technology analysis? And that the analysis that justifies the selection of hybrids or battery electric batteries for that matter. If you said no to yourself on this, isn't that a problem? I have spoken with senior leadership at RTA and PACE, and I FOIA'd RTA, PACE, and CTA, and apparently no such analysis has been done, or at least not that's been disclosed through FOIA. How can $189 million of taxpayer funding be committed to without such an analysis? I again call upon this board to act. I plead to you to defer PACE and CTA commitments until such analysis is completed. I have another plea request. Director Kutarik, sorry, just having a tough time with your name. Last week at City Club luncheon for NEDA, you said it's a fresh start, a unique opportunity for government. And you called on industry to step up to the table. Where you used to get no has changed. Well, I'm stepping up to the table with a solution that saves money and provides better environmental outcome and provides the region with economic development opportunity. I've been told no many times by RTA, PACE, and other stakeholders. I ask you, will you please meet with me to go over the value proposition so you can determine the merit and to see what the next steps are? You seem to be in contact with the legislatures. As I asked RTA and the RTA leadership, they point to the legislators. I call Senator Rahm and Representative Delgado's office and chiefs of staff. They say that's the transit. There's a bunch of this going on. Cost efficiency, environmental stewardship, fiscal responsibility, all that is demanded and an analysis needs to be done. You can't just say BEB is it. Hybrids is it. It's got to be justified. Thank you.
Wait, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Michael. Yes.
Didn't we,
Dr. Bandero.
in a prior action item, didn't we connect him to like CTA's procurement? I just want to, did you end up speaking the procurement of?
I've been connected to RTA leadership, and was saying, and here's a couple of comments I get to say, hey, here's the opportunity, see compressed natural gas with renewable natural gas. I was told we can't, we're subject to the zero emissions. By the way, the zero emission vehicle law doesn't start until June of this year. Therefore, hybrids have been built, are being purchased or committed to instead of CNG, RNG as an evaluation. So anyway, I brought the CNG, RNG, and I was told, and I said, well, how can you say this without even looking at the numbers? I was told the numbers don't matter because there was this law that's not going to come into effect until June 1st. I'm saying numbers do matter. And if the law doesn't make sense, change the law. The ZEV emission mandate is a bad law. It doesn't consider cost. It doesn't consider performance fit for the Chicago winters. It doesn't consider reliability. It only considers emissions. And I'll tell you, battery electric buses have a carbon footprint. They have a criteria footprint when they use diesel-fueled heating auxiliary units. Hybrid electrics are more expensive and have a worse environmental benefit than CNG, RNG. This is what I'm driving you guys to do the numbers. We can't just go zero emission vehicles and say, wow, or hybrid electric, wow, they must be no emissions and better for us. At 1.5 million a throw for BEB buses, that's a huge premium. CNG, RNG can get you as good carbon footprint, even better than BEB, and 80 to 85% of the criteria pollution at a fraction of the cost. Why wouldn't we do that? If environmental emissions and criteria pollution is the game here and cost efficiency, consider all options. Don't just go with the ideological aspiration. I am pretty passionate about this stuff, guys. Sorry. Just look at the numbers. Remove my passion. Look at the numbers. Do the numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
With that, nobody else is going to ask a question. Sorry about that.
Madam Secretary, add Director Mondero to the roll, if you would. All right. Any other witnesses for this morning, Joey?
No other comers.
Excellent. Item 5 is the Executive Director's Report. Leanne, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Dillard, members of the board. Happy New Year. It seems weird I feel like why are we still saying this? But it is our first meeting of the new year. So welcome to 2026. And it's going to be a busy year for everyone. We have a pretty lengthy presentation coming up on the transition with the NEDA bill, with the NEDA implementation of the NEDA Act and the transition for that. So I'll just jump straight to a legislative update for you. On the federal level in Washington, members of Congress continue discussions on the remaining 26 appropriations packages. They've released 2, as they call them, minibuses, because it's not one big omnibus, it's 2 smaller minibuses. Spending packages, they released those in recent weeks. The Transportation, Housing and Urban Development Bill is expected to include a final minibus package to be released soon. Funding under the current continuing resolution expires on January 30. And if lawmakers don't come to an agreement by then, they're going to need to pass another short-term or continuing resolution for the remaining bills that will really allow the funding of government to the current levels that the law has set forward. And if they don't do that, then we'll be facing a government shutdown. In the event of a government shutdown, just to remind everyone that transit funding still largely flows because of the way that the funding is set up for public transportation. RTA staff do continue to monitor this situation and the process. We continue to communicate with our legislators in Washington, and just with the key point being that future and ongoing sustainable funding is critical, and focusing also on the next surface transportation bill with them. On December 12, Senators Chris Van Hollen and John Fetterman reintroduced their Moving Transit Forward Act, which would create permanent funding for large transit agency operating expenses. Funding under their proposal would cover the costs of adding new routes, increasing service frequency, preventing cuts to current service, and improving safety for customers and workers. Among the investments that would also, there are other investments that could also improve rider experiences. The bill has 9 co-sponsors, including Senator Duckworth so far. We're also working with Senator Durbin's office to see if he is interested in signing on as a co-sponsor. Closer to home, lawmakers returned to Springfield this week. The Senate met on Tuesday. The House is scheduled to meet next Tuesday. Staff are coordinating with the service boards also to compile a slate of suggested technical fixes, if you will, to the NEDA Act to ensure a smooth transition from RTA to NEDA. There's some technical errors in the document, and we're compiling those to share with legislators as they move forward and if they consider a trailer bill to clean some of that up. So next slide, please. We're going to kick off today's meeting with a presentation, as I noted, on the NEDA implementation and the next steps. Then you're going to hear an update on the joint development study work that is currently underway, as well as an update on the implementation of the ADA action plan that was implemented in October. We're then going to see some monthly financial reports, then ask you for a vote on a resolution honoring Director Yonin's service as director, and on travel expenses. We will then move from this room to executive session and adjourn from there after that meeting. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it back to you, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? If not, we will move on to item 6A, which is the NEDA implementation timelines and what our next steps are.
I'm going to have a few of us speaking to this and acknowledging up front, this is kind of longish and weedy, but it's a longish bill, and there's a lot of things on everyone's agenda. So we want to kind of make sure that everyone here is kind of up to speed and kind of knows what is on the docket, if you will, but then even more importantly, looking for your feedback on some of the work for next steps in this interim period before the implementation of NEDA going into effect.
And just for purposes of the board, it's more than us that's going to be indoctrinated this morning. A number of members of the media have called and said, you know, what are your next steps? And I told them, tune into our board meeting, you know, today, and they can listen to Rob and Malik and Leanne and the staff. So I know there's media interest in, because they've been saying, what's the next steps? And I've told them, tune in today, and I know they're listening. So it's all yours.
Thank you. So next slide, please. So the NEDA Act has an enormous amount of detail and touches almost every aspect of this region's transit system, with many changes and key milestones that need to be met in the coming years ahead. In your agenda, and also available on our website, is a memo that summarizes the NEDA Act. So our presentation today, we want to cover a detailed overview of that memo, prompt discussion from you by first looking at the timeline for the next few years, including what the agency's responsibilities will be in that transition. We will also go over some key deadlines and responsibilities for IDOT and other outside stakeholders, milestones on safety improvements for riders, as well as changes to the fare system, service stations, and other studies that the legislation requires. We'll also go over a few public policy changes that will happen when the bill becomes effective on June 1st, and talk a little bit about how the agency will prioritize transparency and accountability during this transition as we work to set up NEDA for success. Then we will discuss the work that is happening now and work that needs to be prioritized in order to meet key milestones and deadlines within the bill. So next slide. This is just a quick graphic that shows a high-level look at some of the key dates and the timeline over the next 18 months. We'll be going into more detail on those and the other deadlines in some coming slides, but it's just a quick sort of snapshot look. You're clicking. Okay, I was like, who's clicking? All right, thanks. So on June 1st, as I noted, that is a key date for the transition when the NEDA Act will take effect. The agency we're planning to hold a special board meeting that day to vote on whether to increase the RTA sales tax by 0.25% in Cook and the Collar counties. The agency board will transition in September, with the terms of current members expiring September 1st and new appointments seated by September 29. All the governor's appointments must be confirmed by the Illinois Senate. The NEDA chair will be selected at the first meeting after September 1st. Once the new board is seated, they will appoint an executive director who must be confirmed by the Illinois Senate. The NEDA chair and executive director would be involved in the hiring process for any new service board executive directors as well. If the Senate is out of session, both the chair and executive director can serve as acting until the Senate takes action. By October 1, NEDA must appoint members of the transition working group, which will oversee the transition along with IDOT and the consultant team. The working group will comprise of 15 representatives from the agency, the service boards, along with representatives from organized labor. So next slide. So while the work on the transition continues this fall, or through the fall, the agency will work to meet the deadlines related to the revised regional budget process. By October 1, the NEDA Act requires the agency to realize net savings in its annual budget for the next year via $10 million in service delivery savings, $20.1 million in savings from labor optimization, and $16.8 million in real estate and other property-related savings. In a change from previous years, the 27 regional budget must be adopted by November 30 this year, so essentially a month earlier than normally would be required. This earlier date and the condensed budget timeline is in place for just that 1 year, with the deadline for future budget cycles left to the discretion of the future NEDA board. I think it's important to note that the existing RTA board begins the budgeting process, because as most of you know, the budgeting work begins in May of each calendar year. And the issue, and then you also define and approve and issue essentially the revenue marks or the funding allocations available to each service board before the NEDA board will be seated. So that's some of the transition stuff that we all have to work for. And we will complete that process with the service boards, both sort of before and after the new NEDA board is in place. In December 26, the agency must also appoint a chief internal auditor. In January 27, the agency board will receive a report featuring recommendations from the transition consultant. And we'll go into a little bit further detail on the next slide. On January 1st, 27, also marks the implementation of a new process for a 5-year capital program. The law prescribes several meaningful changes on how the program is designed, including new criteria for evaluation, NEDA retaining responsibility for all regionally significant projects, and the implementation of fast track authority. So next slide. I want to transition for a moment to some key deadlines that apply to other organizations involved in the transition. NEDA leaders and staff will deeply be involved in many of these processes, but the agency itself will not be the lead implementer. As I mentioned earlier, IDOT must contract with a third-party consultant to assist with the transition by September 1st. We've had several conversations with IDOT since the Act was passed, and we understand that their intention is to get that consultant on board much sooner than that deadline so the work can begin earlier. By January 27, that consultant must deliver its recommendation to the agency board. These recommendations will include a series of things, and I'll just touch on a few of them at a high level. A new process between the service boards and NEDA to create a 5-year capital program by Jan 1st, 27 to be specific. I want to note here that the dates are both correct. So the report with the recommendations to the agency's board are due on the same day that the program actually goes into effect. So just another point just to note. A new process for universal fare system must be laid out. A new fare system will need to be procured in 2028, and that will be covered in more detail later in this presentation. The consideration of a sworn law enforcement officer crime prevention program on public transportation will be included. An evaluation of procurement with special consideration given to bulk fuel purchases, information technology services, consulting contracts, and subscriptions will also be included as part of the recommendations. And an evaluation of paratransit programs and recommendations for improved and coordinated service. And this must be brought to the NEDA board by January 27 for review and approval. By July 1, 27, the consultant must deliver to the General Assembly the final report of the transition activities completed to date, future recommendations, and any relevant data that they deem appropriate. So I'm now going to turn it over to Rob, and he's going to discuss some more key dates as it relates to safety and fares.
Good morning. I'm Rob Nash, Director of Government Affairs. I'll cover some key dates and milestones. Excuse me. Sorry. Safety and regarding safety and security changes. I will note that Malik will have more to add regarding immediate priorities on several of these items that we're discussing to give you sort of a near-term snapshot. After the legislation takes effect on June 1st, the Cook County Sheriff's Office will establish the NEDA Law Enforcement Task Force via intergovernmental agreement in coordination with the Chicago Police Department, Metro Police Department, the Illinois State Police, and county sheriff's offices within the region. We have engaged with the Cook County Sheriff's Office to begin initial discussions on this process, and this will remain a key priority in the near term. In addition, NEDA will establish an Office of Transit Safety and Experience, and the Executive Director will designate a full-time Chief Transit Safety Officer. The Chief Safety Officer must have previously served in a supervisory capacity at a law enforcement agency. Responsibilities of the office include developing and implementing a regional safety strategy and coordinating across law enforcement agencies in the region. The office will also assemble and manage the Coordinated Safety Response Council, which includes representatives from NEDA, the service boards, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, law enforcement agencies, and social service agencies, and others. By December 2026, the task force must submit recommendations to the Coordinated Safety Response Council, and that report will include a determination of which code of conduct violations fall under the purview of sworn law enforcement or transit ambassadors, and then recommendations for ongoing law enforcement strategies, tactics, and best practices for the system. These recommendations are to be used by NETA in implementing a sworn law enforcement officer crime prevention program. Next slide, please. The implementation of safety and security changes will advance in January 2027, when existing CTA and Metro employees that are transitioning to serve as transit ambassadors will undergo training. In March 27, the Coordinated Safety Response Council will issue a report on using sworn law enforcement officers to respond to crime on public transit. This report will include feasibility and assessment of various strategies and the qualifications, training requirements, and accountability measures to implement those strategies. In July 2027, the new Transit Ambassador Program and training program will be implemented. Ambassadors' responsibilities will include wayfinding and other rider assistance, monitoring compliance with codes of conduct, and liaising with law enforcement, social services, and community resources. Also, by July 1st, the NETA board will vote to implement a sworn law enforcement crime prevention program. Next slide, please. We'll look at a few key dates and milestones related to a new fare system and associated programs. By July 1st, 2027, the agency will coordinate with the service boards to develop a process for procuring a universal fare instrument. This procurement process for the new universal fare system will begin in January 2028. The following new fare programs must be implemented by June 1st of 2028. Fare capping, which ensures that no rider pays more than the cost of a daily, weekly, or monthly pass, even if they are choosing to pay per trip. A free and reduced fare program for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, and an income-based reduced fare program for returning residents, veterans, and individuals experiencing homelessness. I just want to note here that these fare programs are all regional in nature, meaning all service boards will participate and need to be in place while a new fare system is being procured. Next slide, please. The new law also requires the system to implement new service, open new stations, and study potential extensions. We'll discuss these in more detail at next month's meeting, but we did want to flag some of the requirements included in the legislation on the capital side and the extension of service outside the region. Needless to say, it deserves more conversation, but given our agenda today, we will defer that until next month's, but some significant capital programs that need or projects that need to make progress in a relatively short term. Next slide, please. That's it for the key dates and deadlines, but we also want to flag some important policy changes that will go into effect with the legislation on June 1st. As of June 1st, NETA sets all fare policy, coordinates all fares, and manages all regional fare programs. As a reminder, the NETA Act mandates no fare increases in 2026. The fare box recovery ratio is reduced from the current 50% to 25%, with a waiver in place for 2026 due to the ongoing recovery from pandemic-related ridership drops. Once the bill does take effect, the agency must not enter into a contract to purchase a bus that is not zero emissions, although the agency would not be deemed out of compliance if buses, funding, or necessary charging, fueling, or storage facilities are not available. Also effective June 1st, the agency's budget limit is lifted for 26 and 27, and the 5% budget growth cap is reinstated in 2028. That's again for the NETA agency itself. During this time, the agency will be required to create new offices or departments, including the Office of Transit Safety and Experience, a new Office of Disability Policy and Planning. The new Disability Office will collaborate with the ADA Advisory Council to develop ADA-related training standards, paratransit eligibility criteria, and a regional transit accessibility plan. That concludes my part of the presentation. I will note here that we are in conversation with other stakeholders involved in the transition, as well as lawmakers in the governor's office, to better understand their expectations of us and their interpretations of responsibilities for all the parties. In addition, we expect that discussing progress on these efforts will be a topic at every board meeting moving forward. I'm going to turn it over to Malik to discuss specifically what from those items from this timeline that will be agency priorities in 26 as we look to ensure NETA can hit the ground running and meet the deadlines we've just gone over. When he concludes, we look forward to answering any questions and further conversation.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, everybody. You've heard a lot of information. We'll go to the next slide. So what we wanted to focus on, as you heard, there are external players. We have a bunch of deadlines. Service boards have changes coming their way. So we tried to sort of prioritize and distill this. So my slides will focus on areas where we have certain deadlines coming up in 2026, as you just heard, or by Jan 1, 2027. Staff will need time to work on them and collaborate with the service board. So we are looking for feedback on these specific priorities that we believe the RTA staff should focus on for the next 6 months. Next slide. So I'll go through 6 or 7 buckets that we have identified where I won't repeat everything Rob and Leanne just said, but these are the specific items that we are looking at. So for example, on budget, we have identified some key priorities because there's a combination of our staff launching the 2027 budget process in the summer while some of these deadlines come up. But most importantly, as you know, we brought the 2026 budget to you with a regional pot of funding that can be allocated by the RTA board, or the RTA board can decide to leave portions of that for the NEDA board to decide on. But we have regional funding available to fund some of these priorities here or at the service boards. So our goal is to sort of work through the budget process this time with the truncated timeline for 27, but also focus on any potential amendments that we'll need to make in 2026. Additionally, as Leanne mentioned earlier, the 2026 efficiencies are defined in the bill, and NEDA is required to sort of check the box on whether we and the service boards met them by October 1st. That's not that far away. So we'll definitely make that a priority in our working group to get that information from service boards and make sure they're meeting those deadlines. And as I mentioned, the 2027 kickoff will happen while this board is still here in May, and then the process of putting the funding allocations with the 2027 formula is different. So working with service boards to reach, sort of going through the analysis of the different measures and reaching a conclusion. And many of you will sign off on that, and service boards will prepare their budgets, and the NEDA board will sign off on the final budget. So again, this will be a hybrid sort of approval process at this agency. Moving to capital, you heard some of the conversations around the Jan 1 launch of the new process, and IDOT will be involved. But we also think that we already have 15 measures of evaluation of every project. We have tons of information and collaboration that we do. So we're going to start aligning that closer to the bill over the next several months. You also heard that it's upon us to figure out a process for any potential waivers to the zero emissions mandate. We also have the $180 million a year of new capital funding that we have also deferred to make any decisions. But that funding, we'll work with IDOT to come over, and then we'll have to decide how to, in a future amendment, allocate that to CTA, Metra, and PACE. Next slide. Couple of other key priorities. Again, you heard quite a bit on public safety being a regional issue with a lot of folks involved. But for example, there are some very specific things that we need to do and launch them sooner than later. One of them is a regional app to report incidents. So for example, Metra has one. CTA kind of relies on the chatbot, but by November 2026, we have to have a regional app. So how to sort of piggyback on one of the existing items that we have and make it regional, or do we bring something new on? Those will be really quick decisions that we'll need to work through. We also are required to coordinate with the agencies to make sure that every bus has a bus shield for the operator for their protection. CT and PACE on any of the new buses, they come with it, but there are obviously some legacy buses. So we'll work with them this year to put together the schedule, cost estimates, things like that. And then we have to make sure all buses are retrofitted in 2027. So again, that'll come up pretty quickly. And finally, transit ambassador training has to be available for any agency staff that will also do double duty or before any new folks are hired by the end of 2026, even if the program launch can happen in 27. On fair policy and programs, technically starting June 1, NEDA is in charge of any program and policy decisions. It kicks off right away. Obviously, we'll work through 26, 7, and 8 to consolidate a bunch of the programs we have. But we also think there are some opportunities that a bunch of specific populations will be eligible for reduced fare or free rides. We already have an access program with Metra for reduced fare that we can expand to CTA and PACE if the board chooses to allocate funding, and work through the process of sort of the Ventra upgrade that's going on. Where does a lot of this stuff fit in that's new with the schedule that the service boards have with their current contractor? So we'll have to sort of have that conversation. And we believe that we need to get some consultant assistance on board because any development and analysis of a regional fare chart will take a while. So before NEDA board even sees a proposal in mid-27, the staff and the consultant will have to spend a lot of time doing data analysis, and we would like to get started on that. Next slide. And so these are the 3 remaining sort of priorities that I'll go over quickly, partly because you hear a little bit more about that after this, so I won't take a lot of our time here. But for example, transit supportive development and land use changes, some of the parking mandate changes or authority that the new authority we have, a lot of that happens right away on June 1. So our team is working on some of the work we were already doing, and we'll likely come to you in February or March with a scope amendment so that we can align that better. So Heather will come up here in a minute after this discussion and present more details on the joint development study. So I'll just move on from that right now. Service planning, I mean, many of you have voiced the desire that we take a much deeper role in whenever CTA is making changes, Metra or PACE, that we are making sure that the regional component is taken into account. So we would like to move forward on that because there are a bunch of changes planned for 2026. And it gets all the staff to start working on the process that is a precursor to the 2027 service plan that will be regional. So this year is sort of, training wheels, getting some work done here, and then in 27 we kick off the official process. And finally, on customer information, we are required to put together a language access plan this year. CTA, Metra, and PACE have specific requirements for providing enough language access already, but now this will be a NEDA requirement, so we'll work together on that. And then we have put out a customer information action plan with CTA, Metra, and PACE earlier this year that you have seen presentations on. So now we are looking at that list of items that would improve customer information of tracking information, other things. How does that align with NEDA taking over consolidated customer information in a few years? So those things will get meshed together. So these are the buckets that we have identified, and this is the direction we would like to give our staff to put together working groups and move forward internally over the next 6 months and package this together into a potential budget amendment that we can bring to you so that these priorities can be met in a timely manner. Next slide. So here are some ideas. I already started alluding to it, the pathways that we are thinking about, working groups with service boards in Q1 to flesh a lot of these things out while the IDOT and other processes kick off. Potential budget amendment to sort of move some funding into these areas, very much making sure that the NEDA board eventually will make the policy decisions. A lot of this is the work that has to be done so we can bring those policy proposals to NEDA in the future. The staff work plan at RTA and our procurements will start reflecting these priorities. So you'll see some of anything you see in the next few months will align with these buckets is sort of our goal. And finally, as Leanne mentioned, we are making sure that a lot of this work will continue to align very closely with other folks, especially IDOT, because they have very specific requirements in the bill. So with that information, before we open it up, Leanne will conclude on the last slide with how we are thinking of engaging the public and being transparent about this. Next slide.
So I know we put a lot there in front of you, but everything that's been mentioned was mandated under the NEDA Act. And because it has an enormous impact on the success of the transit system and the people who use it, the agency is committed to being transparent, as I noted, with both lawmakers and riders throughout this whole transition period. And we mentioned earlier that we have released an updated version of our analysis of the NEDA Act as part of our board materials today, and shared it with all of you. I encourage you to let people know that that is available also on our website. We'll also publish a blog series diving more deeply into many of these topics and some of the future topics that we'll be talking about with you on the aspects of the NEDA bill over the next few weeks. So, the public and other audiences can better understand kind of what's coming and what needs to be done to even set up before NEDA comes into the new NEDA board is seated. And it's work for not just, this focus is on the next 6 months, but then it's sort of teeing up in the priorities for the next 12 and multiple years beyond that for the full execution of the NEDA legislation. Our communications team is also planning to transition to a hub on our website, create a transition hub on our website later this spring that will really make all the most current information available so people can see it, things that are in the works and how they're progressing. Whether it's going to be produced by us or produced by others, we'll also post it and make it available. Everything I've mentioned will also be summarized and linked as well in our twice monthly regional transit update newsletter that we publish and distribute also via our social media channels. We'll also continue to engage the Transit is the Answer coalition that we have through meetings and webinars and other informational sessions to update them, get their feedback for any of the work that we're doing. And that's kind of just a really still high level overview of everything that is coming. With that, we're available for any questions that you have and feedback.
Questions, comments, suggestions? We missing anything? Director Mondero.
Good morning. Happy New Year. My understanding, I think from the approved 2026 budget, there's about 300 million. That's
Correct.
flexible for the RTA. So rather than the standard formulas that we had been given in the past, we as a board have the discretion to give 300 million to the service boards for whatever it is.
That's some of the additional money that will come online in 26. There's also an additional 180 million estimated on the capital side that can be programmed as well.
Okay, so if total is 480, and what I'm wanting to kind of get to is public safety. So if we wanted to, if the service boards, particularly like CTA, we wanted to do something to supplement security. I heard Rob say that we've had conversations with the Cook County Sheriff's Office. So if, let's say that the Sheriff's Office, the Illinois State Police, say that they can commit whatever 50 additional officers who are working overtime or otherwise, is there a method for us to fund that in advance of June or September?
I believe, yes,
Thank you.
a budget amendment.
Yeah, yes. But they're future items that we could bring forward to you as a budget amendment to allocate dollars to do really anything from our perspective that was within those 6 buckets, and public safety was one of those buckets.
Okay, and have the conversations with the Illinois State Police and the Cook County Sheriff's Office, like, have you discussed already with them, like, the number of officers who are willing to do overtime or officers that they can deploy directly for transit? And if you haven't, I'd ask you to begin those conversations.
We have had preliminary conversations, but we have not had that level of conversation in terms of, force assignment and that kind of thing. I will note, and perhaps council can elaborate, but, if we are to dedicate funds and begin programming outside of the legislation, I think there would need to be some type of intergovernmental agreement on that. I understand, and we all share the urgency on public safety, but there needs to be some infrastructure established to implement these things, even if we have the resources available and the board decides to dedicate them to a particular effort. So with all haste, we're having those conversations. We are, again, unfortunately, we're in a little bit of a transition period where some of the governing bodies that the legislation lays out are not yet constituted. And, we'll need some type of, roadmap to shift resources. And as mentioned, that is a priority for us in the near term.
Director Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to belabor the point, and I think this is a great recap of, at a high level, the strategies, priorities, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things that we talked about in terms of a difference between the RTA board as it exists now and the NETA board was the ability to have control and authority and in effect stop some things if they needed to, that didn't make sense. In the outline, where would that element be shown, or how should we look to see that be made manifest?
Well, I think there are several places where the general responsibilities of the NETA board have been laid out. There are some specifics around the three key buckets that are sort of, I would term, new, which are setting fair policy, service standards, and capital planning prioritization, where there are particular and specific authorities invested in the new NETA board. But there are several locations, and I can get you the sites, but where there's sort of a general supremacy clause defined in terms of NETA's responsibilities and sort of, I guess you'd say, the hierarchy of how those decisions will be made, and the NETA's ability to, for lack of a better term, dictate certain terms to the service boards.
That would be very important. Thank
I
you.
can get you that. Thank you.
Director Gorman.
Thank you, Chairman Dillard. Thank you for the presentation. So with this, under public safety, there were several new task force, coordinated council, a couple positions such as the chief transit safety officer. There's discussion about transit ambassadors. So are there, in the legislation, is there job descriptions and requirements established for those positions? Because they're very important positions, and I think there's very important requirements that should be involved with who's gonna.
Yeah, so
obtain
there's
these
actually
positions.
like no job description specifically for the police, the chief officer. There is a requirement that they have served in public safety, in leadership in public safety in the past. Again, this is one of the areas too that RTA is not, or the agency is not in the lead on. It's assigned to a combination of Cook County, Sheriff's Department. There's some IDOT oversight of this and this. So this is one of the areas where there's kind of multiple players at the table. And all of that is part of my sense, and you guys jump in, but that's part of the analysis and the work that has to be done as part of the study and evaluation, with recommendations to be forthcoming to the NETA board.
Thank you.
Director Quinteric.
Thanks, Chairman. And thanks to all three of you. I want to applaud the approach on this. I think the theme of being really transparent and having the prioritization conversation here at the board and in public is really important to communicate, to the stakeholders who created the legislation, the General Assembly and the Governor's office, that there's no surprises. We're really trying to have this in a fulsome way and talk about the trade-offs. Which one should we do first? Where do you invest? Where do you let the service boards lead? Where do we have? There's not a science to it. There's a lot of gray area that the legislation, I think, encourages us in the spirit of collaboration to have exactly this conversation. So I, applaud that and really hope that continues. The second piece is the priorities that Malik, you had put out about where we should invest in maybe consultant support and early analysis, I think is absolutely right. The fair policy stuff, I think that makes a ton of sense. You want to hand that over to NETA. We've looked at this. This is where this is, so that decision can happen quicker. I think on the TOD and the development side, I think that's also great, and we had a head start on that. And the third one on the service planning, those are sort of, I think, really good. No one's going to complain about that. I think that shows good governance. On the public safety, though, piece is one where I think that, this is the most important issue. We've identified this. I think we need to spur that convening between the Cook County Sheriff and all of those parties. I don't know who has that convening and where that happens exactly, but it has to happen. We need to have more sort of shape to that yesterday. I mean, that needs to happen. Are there analysis and data that we can help provide early, right? This is sort of, I'm trying to think of the theme of this current RTA lame duck, and all of us here? How do we present the current existing conditions, the landscape? This is what has been done. This is what we think has worked. This is what we haven't. The more that we can put into that, I think is really, really important. And then the other question that I have is, how can we leverage the capacity at the service boards and bring it up? Is that an intergovernmental agreement? They do have staff, they have expertise. Some of the service boards are hiring in these very areas, whether it's development or public safety. How can we bring that up and give that person or people the ability to look at this regionally and have that conversation with all of the service boards and the others that are involved in this, because that's where we're headed. So, I think if there's a way that we can bring that up and start those discussions, that's a good idea in my mind.
I'll just add that I think the focus of the working groups is to actually do that. It's the coordination and collaboration amongst the service boards. We had our monthly meeting with the EDs, and that was the theme. Like, this is what we're walking through with the board, looking for board direction and feedback. If we get that nod, then we'll be convening. The extra carrot is that there's the potential of some allocation in the interim of some of those amounts of money to advance some of those near-term priorities for the setup for NETA too. So that's kind of the focus of the next 6 months of our work, and the sort of the structure around it would be through those working groups with any budget amendments coming back to you for discussion.
Director Carey.
Thanks to all of you. It was a terrific presentation, and I agree with the priorities, with the approach on it. I think it's well thought out. And I guess as a board member, I'm just asking that you come up with a good way to keep us informed. I mean, we only get together once a month. You guys are going to be doing just an awful lot of work that's going on your part and on the Service Bureau's part. And if we could keep, at some point, each of you probably mentioned bringing, specific things to us as things come up that we need to vote on, perhaps budget amendments, whatever, but some sort of comprehensive document that keeps us apprised of what you're doing in each of these areas. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think the transit hub is going to be a good tool, and we can remind you too of links and posting when we post links to that or updates to that. And I think every month, beyond actual action amendment items, we contemplate, like we're going to do right after this, is kind of a deeper dive into some of these topics and then regular updates as work progresses. Next month, we anticipate bringing more of a capital discussion with you about sort of what are some of these interim steps that we can be taking with the setup for further consideration of the new capital prioritization process. So sort of keeping the conversation going for your input and feedback and updates as progress is being made.
Thank you. Anything else? It'll be very interesting and it's very important that Sheriff Dart and that task force work closely with the Chicago Police, who obviously have experience, but it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic fits together. I guess my comments are, our mission of the RTA is to provide a seamless and smooth transition from the RTA to NETA. We're obviously well on our way to doing that and working on things really before they actually become set by law for the new NETA in the new bill. So we've already begun that process, and it's our goal and mission to make sure there's a seamless transition and handoff from the RTA to NETA. And for the members, I think I've told you before, if you're interested in serving on NETA, talk to your appointing authorities. And as I look around here, some of you will be on and be the NETA board. So, but this process, thanks to the staff, a lot of hard work. We want to make this as seamless and efficient as possible. Thank you all very, very, very much. It's a great start. Let's move on to 6B, which is the joint development study. And I know Heather Mullins, I saw her sitting out there. There she is. Will be giving this presentation.
Good morning.
Good
My
morning.
name is Heather Mullins. I'm the Division Manager of the Local Planning and Program Management Group, and I'll be providing an update on our joint development study. Okay, so in June of 2025, the board approved a contract for us to work on a joint development study for the region, which we kicked off in July. I'll give an update on that study, but first I want to give a little bit of background on our existing work that is related to joint development. So the RTA has been working in the realm of planning for transit-oriented development, or TOD, and more recently ETOD, or equitable transit-oriented development, for nearly 30 years. So we administer the community planning program, which is a technical assistance and funding program for local communities. We fund ETOD plans, transit corridor studies, and zoning code updates. We also administer the Access to Transit program, which is a funding program to implement small-scale access to transit projects, such as sidewalk gaps, crosswalks, and covered bike parking at stations. We also periodically publish educational pieces, such as the Transit-Friendly Communities Guide that was released about a year ago. One of the recommendations in that guide was for the RTA and our transit agencies to explore the potential for a joint development program in the Chicago region. So I would describe joint development as a tool or an approach to achieve ETOD. It's a real estate development that largely occurs on transit agency-owned land, and that could be an underutilized commuter parking lot or the land the station sits on itself. Transit agencies actively participate in joint development projects and partner with a private entity, which is usually a land use developer, through either selling the property, renting the land through ground leases or air rights, or a whole host of real estate approaches. The projects are physically or functionally related to a transit facility, so it must be in an ETOD area, and can involve the improvement of the transit facility and the affected property. So, for example, perhaps a new station is integrated into a larger multifamily building. There are generally three main goals that transit agencies look to achieve through joint development. They include raising revenue to help fund transit operations, and this is through monetizing agency assets. This is often realized through leasing land to private developers. Adding housing near transit, the transit agencies own the land, and therefore they have a role in determining what gets built on that land, and can focus on adding housing, and that's often affordable housing near transit. And increasing ridership, which is often a benefit of adding housing or employment near a transit station. So to get more specific to our joint development study, this slide addresses three questions for pursuing such a study. So what are we doing? It's an effort to assess the opportunity for joint development across the RTA system and establish the program framework. We are doing this to actively advance goals related to equitable transit-oriented development. And we are doing it by inventorying existing land owned by the service boards, exploring market readiness of those sites, and testing the financial feasibility of new development on key sites. This is a broad overview of the study scope and timeline. The five main tasks of our study currently are identifying joint development challenges, opportunities, and researching case studies across North America. We've completed that section. Documenting the real estate land holdings with the service boards. That's largely complete and underway. Exploring and evaluating joint development in the RTA region. Analyzing the financial costs and benefits of a joint development program, and developing a recommendation on how a joint development program should be established in our region. There are currently two phases. The first is to determine program goals, inventory the existing property, assess TOD readiness of sites, and determine how we are moving forward. If we determine we're moving forward, the second phase will establish the administrative aspects of the preferred approach. We kick things off in July, and we plan to complete the plan and the inventory web map by the end of this summer. So while we were undertaking the study, Governor Pritzker signed Public Act 104-457, which is, of course, our landmark transit funding and reform legislation. The act does speak to transit supportive development as joint development and defines it as occurring within a half mile of a public transportation station or an eighth of a mile along a bus stop or route. NETA is given authority to pursue joint development, which is an authority the RTA currently does not have. NETA can acquire, sell, and transfer property for the purposes of transit supportive development projects. enter into contracts to pursue transit supportive development, borrow money for the purposes of transit supportive development projects, and use condemnation, but only by local resolution, which means the local government would need to approve the use. The Act further details a requirement that NEDA must develop an inventory of all real property owned by the service boards. Again, that's underway as part of this study. NEDA may establish a transit supportive development incentive fund. This can be used to distribute operating or capital grants or loans to service boards, local governments, or other transportation agencies. That would be as part of a competitive program. Awardees can then use the funds for investment in residential or commercial development, draft and implement land use, zoning, parking, or other laws, and as a funding resource to increase public transportation service in and around transit supportive developments. NEDA must follow all applicable land use laws, including municipal zoning codes, while development projects. And our study will help NEDA meet some of the obligations of the legislation in a timely manner. So I'd mentioned we talked to many transit agencies that have joint development programs to understand their goals, potential revenue, and administrative needs. 5 agencies rose to the top for developing case studies. That included the Dallas DART, the Maryland DOT, the Denver RTD, Washington Metro in DC, and the LA Metro in Los Angeles. And through the process of developing these case studies, of these 5, we learned that there's a varying degree of program complexity, impact, and maturity, creating a broad spectrum of transit agency joint development programs across the US. So we place them here on this line or on this spectrum, showing that the Washington Metro program in DC and LA County have the most aggressive programs, which means that they are dealing with some significant amounts of transit agency owned land and are actively pursuing development projects on that land. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through each of these case studies in detail, but I can provide that information separately if you're interested. But on a high level, we found 4 major takeaways. The first is that land ownership drives the scale of the program. The second is that the opportunity for new revenue is limited, though the long-term benefit of new riders can outweigh those concerns. The third is that dedicated staff is critical to program success. And finally, that partnerships are crucial. So one of the first major deliverables of our study is to develop a complete inventory of land owned by CTA, Metro, and PACE. We've largely completed this work, and the full inventory includes over 3,000 parcels in the 6-county region that include transit stations, right-of-way, maintenance and storage yards, bus garages, park and ride lots, and vacant and surplus land. We worked closely with the transit service providers to narrow the list of 3,000 parcels by removing parcels that were needed for the provision of transit service, for vehicle maintenance and storage, and for other core operational needs. This resulted in 92 parcels with some level of development potential that is worth analyzing. So this inventory will eventually become public, which is required by the Act, and we are still refining the inventory and creating a publicly accessible dashboard, and we expect that to be available this summer. So the Act has changed how we should approach this study so that it does align with the NEDA bill. We need to pivot from a study that focuses on should we pursue a joint development program to how should we pursue a joint development program. Much of the current scope focuses on cost-benefit analysis and revenue potential of pursuing joint development, but we need to focus on a more detailed approach in how to structure a program. For example, we want to evaluate how we can financially structure or model a future program by seeding an incentive fund, perhaps developing a new model to deliver affordable housing, and determine how to catalyze investment in underinvested or in middle markets. There are also more parcels than we originally anticipated, which is great news, but we want to spend some more time evaluating all 92 parcels for land use zoning, previous development efforts. There is also language on a transit supportive development incentive fund that we could potentially structure to support joint development and want to evaluate the potential for funding appropriations for that fund. And because of this, we are working with our consultant team to adjust the scope and budget, and we'll bring that to you for approval at a later board meeting. That wraps up my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions, comments? Yes, Director Paterick.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks, Heather. And again, this is a great example of setting up NETA for success. And I think as much analysis as we can to present is great. The inventory, getting to that number and making that public. My question for you is that I'm a big fan of when you're doing studies to sort of try to have a midpoint, almost implementation, try to accomplish some of the goals as you're doing this. What might fit in that world? Identifying a few parcels that, you know, really sort of rise to the top, like this makes a lot of sense, or something else. What else can we do to sort of, you know, June 1, July, from this analysis and this review, we can hand over and say, look, you know, this is the place you might want to focus and give them an opportunity to have a near-term kind of win.
Yeah, I think the inventory is probably the most important piece, and that's something we can wrap up before the whole study is complete and get that released and out to the public. Part of that is we are currently also selecting some key sites in the variety of markets and throughout the region. I think we have about 6 of them that we're looking at right now, just to test to see what a development program might look on that land based on the current zoning, what the market is, whether that's residential or commercial or what that may be, and trying to kind of test and see what that might look like. And I think that's probably something we can get out to the public in advance as well. I think the key at the end of all of this, after we do all the analysis, is how are we going to do this? And that's just administratively structuring this and how to actually get developers interested, whether we're releasing RFPs or accepting proposals from them and kind of getting things on the ground running quickly. So that's something we do want to accomplish before the end of this process.
And I just add that I think a key underlying theme though is those kind of priority areas, and cannot we just do some initial sort of analysis to demonstrate whether we think that they're the most viable, but actually then take that to, the hope would be to bring that forward and say, can we kind of run and with a goal ultimately of some quick wins on some of this to show that there are opportunities here. It can be a success. Because I mean, that's one of the things too from the takeaways on peers is sort of success breeds success, and it builds upon each other, because then they're like, oh, you can do that. That does work this way. Okay, we can do more of it. And so those examples just build on each other.
Yes, Director Colson.
Yeah, I think this is really an important initiative. You know, we've learned that it's very expensive to bring new transit to people, like at the Red Line extension. It's better if you can bring people to existing transit, which I guess is what we're trying to do here. And where the private sector has failed to do it, you can step in and give it a little boost. So I think this could be an incredibly important project. I can see condos or apartment buildings next to every CTA station and every metro station where they don't already exist. So don't underestimate the importance of what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Director Mondero.
Thanks, Chairman. Hi, Heather. I have one comment and one question. My first comment, from my experience working at the CTA, I know that when we were trying to do TODs, working with the city to relax zoning requirements, like for parking, so that if you're within a certain radius of a train station, we're going to relax your parking, and that like created a big boon in terms of development. So I'm hoping that those kind of conversations will be happening at the region wide. Like, what can we encourage municipalities to do in terms of changing their things? And I'm confident that that's what you are already doing, but I just wanted to put that out there to like challenge everyone that's listening. Like, hey, what creative things can we do thinking outside the box to encourage that development? On slide 36, you mentioned case study takeaways. And so my question is if you could expand on what you mean for opportunity for new revenue is limited, like should we be managing expectations on this? And if so, how and why?
Yeah, I think we've seen particularly outside the US, particularly in Asia, that pursuing joint development is actually how they make their money and how they run the transit service, and that funds the operations. We found in the US, the examples are a little bit different, and even in agencies that have what I would consider significant real estate holdings, and that's particularly WMATA, in Washington DC, they're still not seeing a ton of revenue come in. And they've actually, as part of that, have kind of shifted what their goals are through the program. Okay, this is not how we're going to make a ton of money, but we can achieve all these other goals with increased ridership or affordable housing as part of this program. And still, it's a big part of what they do. We've seen in LA where any money that they actually bring in, any revenue from maybe some market rate developments, they're putting into a fund that would then help fund or seed affordable housing in maybe some more underinvested markets. So it's not really a way to bring in revenue to run operations. There's a little bit that can be seen, but we're finding what's really done is to help fund affordable housing or other things like that.
Right. Any other questions or suggestions for Heather? If not, thank you. As Director Colson said, very important. And when it's done right, it is magnificent.
It's exciting. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Item 6C is coming up here is Peter Kirsten's report on the, or update on the ADA action plan implementation.
Morning, Chairman Dillard and members of the board. I'm Peter Kirsten, Division Manager with Regional Planning, here to provide information on the ADA action plan that the board adopted in June of 2025. This is an information-only item. We'll have some preliminary data to share along with some recommended next steps. So as a reminder, the action plan included both immediate programmatic changes as well as other actions taken that were implemented on October 1, in addition to some long-term things we pointed to. These included on October 1st, PACE set a monthly ride cap of 30 rides on the taxi access and rideshare access programs, known as and referred to throughout this presentation as TAP and WRAP, or the subsidy programs. Previously, the cap was 8 rides per day. Additionally, PACE restored the fare for TAP and WRAP to equal that of traditional ADA paratransit of $3.25. Previously, the fare was $2, covering a total trip subsidy of up to $30. CTA and Metra initiated ride free for all ADA eligible riders following PACE, which had already implemented this. So anyone that is certified for ADA eligibility can ride free across the fixed route system. Previously, ADA eligible riders received a reduced fare on fixed route. Next, RTA Mobility Services conducted a review of paratransit certification. Results of that were shared with the board in August of last year. We covered peer comparison, discussion of best practices, and highlighted cost savings that the Mobility Services Group has achieved in recent years. Looking longer term, the action plan calls for continued analysis of TAP and WRAP to identify potential future programmatic changes. That's some of the discussion today, as well as continuing to work to further align and coordinate county WRAP programs via the Human Services Transportation Plan, or HSTP. The HSTP is in the process of being updated now and will be shared with the board later this spring. So looking first at the impacts of fixed route ridership, as a reminder, more ADA eligible riders travel on fixed route each month than traditional ADA or the TAP and WRAP subsidy programs. The action plan incentivizes further use of fixed route by making it ride free for all ADA eligible. CTA has seen about a 40% increase in weekly rides on bus and rail by ADA eligible Venture card holders. And Metra monthly ridership has shown that ADA eligible rides doubled between October and December since the action plan has been put in place. So accessible fixed route transit is by far the most cost-effective mode to carry ADA eligible riders that are able to use the system. Both are very early results, but certainly a positive trend that we'll continue to track. Looking at the ridership impact on the ADA modes, so the graphic on screen goes back to January of 24. The gold line represents TAP and WRAP monthly ridership. The black line is traditional ADA. So WRAP and TAP, as we know, dramatically grew through 2025, surpassing traditional ADA in monthly trips. The dotted line at far right shows the beginning of the 30 ride per month cap, which went into effect on October 1. So you can see tap and wrap decline pretty sharply from September to October. You can also see an increase in traditional ADA trips in October. October is traditionally a high ridership month. School is back in session. There's a few holidays and the weather isn't too bad yet. So there's definitely some seasonality in the data, but the trend kind of shows what we expected. A big drop in tap and wrap and a bump up for trips carried on the traditional system. Looking a little deeper at the data, so October 25 wrap and tap programs produced 183,000 trips, which is about a 37% decline from the month prior, September. Looking year over year, it's about a 7% decline from October of 24. Traditional ADA carried 250,000 trips, so now surpassing the subsidy programs. This is an increase of about 11% from the month previous. But if you look year over year to kind of get a better seasonal comparison, it's only about a 2% increase. And then November saw similar trends. Tap and wrap accounted for 168,000 trips, 42% lower than September of 25. Looking year over year, it's a 12% decline. Traditional ADA, 220K trips, which is 3% lower than September, and 1% lower than year over year. So tap and wrap ridership has seen a big decrease from the action plan. Traditional ADA shows a bump in October, but looking out over the long term, appears to be more holding steady than a big increase. Slide. So looking a little deeper still. First, I want to just level set, particularly for any newer board members that may have not been along for this entire discussion. As a reminder, there's about 60,000 ADA eligible riders approved by the RTA for service. PACE operates the second largest paratransit service in the United States, well over 2 million trips annually on the traditional ADA system. Of those 60,000, about 12,000 utilize the two subsidy programs in a given month. And then again, fixed route transit actually carries the largest number of ADA eligible trips each year. So with that in mind, looking at kind of the wrap and tap rider impacts as a comparison of how people use the system in September, previous to the action plan and the cap going into place, and then in October. So in September, over 9,000 riders used fewer than 30 trips on tap and wrap that month, whereas just over 3,000 users exceeded 30 trips. So we've kind of referred to this group, the second group, as the power users, people that are really have a higher demand for trips. That top cohort of power users, which again is only about 5% of everybody who's eligible for these programs, they accounted for over 200,000 trips taken in a single month. More than 2/3 of the whole subsidy programs is just in that kind of power user group. In October of 2025, after the ride cap was in place, over 10,000 users did not hit the monthly cap. Those people felt no impact. They continued to use tap and wrap as they had previously, whereas about 2,400 hit the ride cap. Go on to the next slide. So in summary, the action plan has decreased tap and wrap total ridership by roughly 100,000 monthly trips. This has been accomplished while the vast majority of tap and wrap riders were not impacted by the cap and continued to ride how they had previously. This decrease in subsidy trips is projecting to bring down total program costs, while the long-term sustainability of the program is significantly improving, which, as a reminder, these kind of two things were the primary objectives at the time that this plan was developed and adopted by the board. Data suggests that the ride cap, along with the ride free on fixed route, have induced some demand, both on traditional ADA and fixed route transit, as both have seen some modest growth since October. Lastly, everything I have shared up to this point has been quantitative data analysis, but there is a very real human scale and human element to this. Rider sentiment has been expressed to this board this morning and in previous mornings. It's been expressed at the PACE board and to the two ADA citizen advisory boards. It's made clear that the monthly cap on tap and wrap can create a barrier to convenient travel for those who use tap and wrap frequently. 30 rides per month is only 15 round trips, If a rider has frequent medical visits, work trips, or other activities, they may hit that cap. And that human scale impact should not be overlooked when considering big programmatic changes like this action plan. So lastly, board members have asked that staff sketch out and propose some next steps. RTA has initiated an audit of TAP and RAP and traditional ADA covering the period January 1, 24 through November 30, 25. PACE has been notified and the audit will begin in earnest this month. Secondly, staff intend to bring a second action plan for board approval, proposing to keep the 30 ride cap in place while creating a process by which riders can request a 40 ride cap to meet their needs. And lastly, an attempt to explore the potential to make any changes to existing vendor contracts that are with the vendors that are partnering with us on the subsidy programs. So RTA is ready to work with PACE on an action plan 2, but again, that won't begin without further direction from this board. Lastly, the transition to NETA will involve additional paratransit elements to be implemented in the future. This includes implementing a regional dial-a-ride study, continuing the push to coordinate and consolidate local programs at county level, updating and adopting the Human Services Transportation Plan later this year, and then a creation of a new department for accessibility and paratransit planning, at NETA. So that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions or take comments.
Great, thank you. Director Walker, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Chairman. This is great and really happy to see that in September and October, 9,000 plus and 10,000 plus didn't use all of the rides. That's amazing. But I want to zero in on creating a process for those folks that need more. I know that's a next step, but is that something that you could prepare for us for our February meeting? Like criteria for that?
Yeah, I know Michael's group, the Michael Vandekreek Group Mobility Services, has already thought out kind of the back end pieces, the infrastructure needed to change the web portal, create a process by which it's a low barrier for people that can apply. And then what we would look at on the back end as far as who to approve. So I think we can definitely bring more information on that for the board to consider.
Yeah, I think our intention today was give you the data as an update. And I know there's been sort of a range of perspectives expressed by the board. One, a need to think about Action Plan 2.0, but also a recognition of the future steps and the bigger policy conversations and ongoing ways to talk about this and address this for the NETA board to consider. So I think what we're trying to do is just present some ideas that we had around sort of an interim step that could be get that feedback today. And if that is of interest to the board, like we sort of talked about with the transition with the NETA, bigger buckets on things, we can come back and I think we could probably present something to you in February for your consideration and then look to implement that beyond that, based on that board direction.
Director Sonoka.
Thanks so much, Chairman. So with regards to the preliminary proposed 40 limit for Action Plan 2 here, do we have data to support that proposed cap that optimizes ridership and financial capacity? So for example, in your previous slides, you had shown the number of trips beyond that 30 trip ridership amount. What would the distribution of that data set beyond 30 look like? And do we have data for the maximum amount in that population set?
Yeah, so, if you take a step back to kind of look at why RAP and TAP were expanded in the ways that they were, a lot of it comes down to what's the most cost-effective way to move these trips. And you can serve the cost for about 4 RAP trips equals 1 of traditional ADA. Traditional ADA will always be there. RAP and TAP don't have wheelchair accessibility levels that can suit all riders. The traditional system's never going away. It is critical. But there are opportunities where we can take some of those trips off and put them on a RAP or TAP vehicle. So when we put the cap in place, there are people that might hit that cap and then go back and demand more trips on the traditional ADA system. And it's really dialing the right mix of how many trips should, for what rider, for what needs, for what origin and destination are they going to, is the right mode to select to get the best performance for all riders, the best performance for the system, and the right mix of traditional versus tap or wrap. You got to do that while also creating a process that's easy for folks to navigate and not overly cumbersome. So there's data there. We can look at who are the people that went and took more trips on the ADA system. Would it have made sense to keep those people, give them a higher cap with a wrap ride or a tap ride? But you have to kind of create it in a way that's going to work for everybody and be easy to implement and not create huge barriers. So.
My request then would be that when we do revisit this from the preliminary suggestion to be able to show that intersection between why 30 is still the proposed cap for most users, and then to also demonstrate the increased capacity and the percentage of users from the data that we have so far as to why a 40 ride cap is the optimal number to meet that extended need for those that can request a deferral from the regular process, as we've discussed. Ultimately, if the 40 ride ends up being something like 45 or 50, or if we're able to say the capacity of this can actually hold 100 rides per month through this exemption service, I think that will be really helpful information for us as a board to be able to discuss with the public, since this seems to be such a helpful program for many users.
Yeah.
And one thing I think that putting on sort of the financial hat, which is kind of one of the key hats the RTA has to wear, and a lot of earlier discussion, and we can sit down and kind of go through, I know we've had some preliminary conversation about some of the background and some of the history here. There was also a financial consideration, like what was financially sustainable for the program in the long term, what was a viable alternative it would be worse to sort of fund. The challenge we were having was this was sort of exponential growth, and it was not being managed in any way, and it was just not financially sustainable. So the worst scenario was a very well subscribed program that we had to cut off, right? So that's where the intervention initially sort of came from. And we still have to kind of manage that. I will also note that the current budget that we have kind of contemplates the ability to provide some of that flexibility into the program, but on a limited basis. It's not sort of open it up for everybody. That's why we're proposing, or the concept that we're sort of been socializing is sort of keeping the base cap at the 30 and then some other number. And as we've said, 40 rides is, I think, a number that we're considering. But that feedback and that your points are well taken, and we will do some more. I mean, we have that analysis, but we can share more of that with you when we come back.
Thank you.
Dr. Gorman.
Thank you. Just real briefly, I know we want to get to the financials, but this is very helpful, and I think we're really onto something for what we learned from the incredible public speakers when we were going through this process, RTA staff and PACE. So this is very helpful. Will this continue this survey, this review of the 30 ride cap and the potential next steps and the alternatives? Because it seems like, right now it's looking like a 25 to 35% trend of disabled folks that really need to extend the caps.
Yeah, our intention is obviously to continue working with PACE. This is a level of data sharing and analysis that we don't normally work with, but it's been fruitful for this process. And Action Plan 2, I would assume the same. Even with that decline in TAP and RAP ridership, we actually saw about 500 new people using the system in that same time frame. So this topic's going to continue, and I think collaboration and coordination with PACE is a key element of it as well.
Great,
And
this will be real helpful going
Yeah.
into the transition here.
Yeah, and I'll just also note, I mean, our continued conversation with the disability community and Access Living, Peter noted, it's also through conversations with the advisory groups, et cetera. So those conversations will continue as well to incorporate the community into the discussions as we advance.
Great, thank you.
Carrie.
I've expressed before that I'm interested in pursuing this, and as Director Walker said, pursuing an exception process. listening to all this, looking at the data though, and as you said, Leanne, there's no dollars here at all. And this started when we, kind of raised our heads up and saw the somewhat shocking budget overruns starting in '24. And we dealt with those and talked a lot about them. So I think I look at it kind of in two different things here. We put a process out there that people took great advantage of. And some maybe didn't need it as much, sorry, didn't need it as much as others, but people took advantage of it. And there are people who need it legitimately. So we've reduced the cap to 30, and I think we picked 40. Is it the right number? Don't really know. We picked it based on some of the discussions, some of the very early comments talking about, her two sons go to work. This allows them to go to work, to and from work for a 5-day week. So to me, doing that, getting the exception, policy exception process, keeping the 30, going to 40, is an immediate, somewhat immediate, within months sort of process is the way I would support it. The financial aspect and what is overall the right way to handle ADA paratransit between fixed ride, traditional ADA, and the RAP TAP. That's I think a longer discussion. Will take a lot more time than a couple months. Thanks.
Director Jenkins.
Thank you so much. This is something that I've been constantly, worried about as we have more conversations with the community about this issue. As you're exploring, as we continue to have the conversation about what the right fit is, what the right cap is, can you also add or come back to us with some more, maybe as Director Carey was talking about, the numbers, but also, what's the financial feasibility, and do we have the manpower and capacity for a more individualized appeal process where it may be a small, very small amount of people who 40 won't work and maybe it's 50 or 60, but I would want to see the numbers around that, and if that's even like, does RTA have the ability to even do that, and what it would take?
Yeah, I think we can definitely provide more there.
Yeah, we can provide more information when we come back with a full recommendation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Natasha. Director Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to go back to what I've been saying all along, is that our job here is to set up NETA for what is to come, right? And part of the language, the bill, is that NETA is going to study all of this. And so to me, it's like, right now we are literally throwing darts at a dartboard. We don't know. We have the word preliminary keeps coming up, right? We have preliminary data. We don't have solid data to really make these decisions. And so I think for us, it's like, I think we need to just keep gathering the data, keep holding where we're at. There's a reason we dropped the cap to 30. It's because it was growing out of control. I think it's very encouraging to see that once people hit the cap, they go back to traditional. You made the comment, and I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. You had said 3 to 4 rides on Rap and Tap was cheaper than traditional paratransit, but that's only if there's one person on traditional Once you get more people, right, then traditional paratransit is cheaper, correct?
The cost per rider.
Yeah, well, because I think there's a nuance here in the fact that, like, during COVID, when only one person was on a bus at a time, it was $70, right? But now that we're done with that, and once we have more people on it, it's not $70.
No, that's incorrect. The cost per ride is the total riders, or the total operations cost divided by how many riders we carry.
Yeah.
They don't count, it's only the individual who's certified. A lot of people ride with an attendant. That person's not counted in the equation. But if a bus carries 2 or 3 at a time, we're still dividing that operation cost by the total rides carried.
Okay.
And that's where usually it's like a $70, $75 number is developed from. It's a NTD standard. It's, they all report it the same way. We can, I think continuing to educate about how this works is a big part of it too, so we can revisit some of that stuff as well.
Okay. Well, thank you for that clarification. But yeah, it's one of those, like, to me, we just don't have enough information right now. And, if we go in and make changes, and then, and the other thing too, is that in the November meeting, when PACE presented its budget, Maggie said, our budget is based on 30 rides, and they seemed content with that. And they said, you know, we're going to continue to monitor it and we'll come back to you at a time that we think something needs to change. And so it's like, you know, I just think that right now it's like we need to set up NETA to be successful. We need to allow them to do the analysis that they're looking to do, and then and just see how all of this works together. Thank you.
Thanks, Nora. Yes, Director Mondero.
Question that I've asked before. Do we know how much Uber as corporate keeps its profit from this versus the amount of money that's going to the riders? Or pardon me, to the drivers of Uber?
In terms of how Uber drivers serve these customers, it's no different than any other Uber customer. The Uber driver wouldn't even know that this is a person participating in Rap or Tap.
But do we know, or does Pace have the information as to how much the driver is like because we're authorizing millions to go to Uber annually, and I'm just wanting to know how much is going to Uber corporate in the Bay Area versus like staying with the local workforce.
We can look for that information. It's not something we're privy to, but yeah, we can seek more info on that.
And Leanne, are you working with Pace to look at that contract?
Well, I think that, as we've said, that this is kind of an interim suggested solution or step. And then there's the much, as Director Ryan has said, that the NETA Act requires not just looking at ADA, but paratransit as a whole with the county-based systems as well. So that, and then longer term conversations vis-a-vis the contracts for the provision of these kinds of services all become part of that longer term conversation. You know, we've had one preliminary conversation with Uber, and you serve as another vendor. It's not just Uber, it's you serve as another vendor that provides these services as well. So they're part of the longer term, bigger policy conversations that still have to occur coming in the coming months.
I'd look at that contract closely and see what any other cities that have anything close to comparable. And we are clearly as generous here as any city in America. Any other questions before we move on to Sarah and an update on financials? Great. Thank you, Peter. Very, very, very much. Six D is the monthly financials. Sarah Rubino, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Directors. I'm Sarah Rubino, Principal Analyst. This will be a brief update on the financial results of the service boards through November 2025. The CTA, Metra, and Pace Suburban Service each continued to report favorable to budget operating deficits ranging from about 6% to 12% due to lower than budgeted operating expense performance. The system-wide operating deficit of the service boards, including ADA paratransit, was about $2.6 billion. This regional result is $209.7 million, or 7.4% favorable to budget. Now that we're comparing to the amended ADA paratransit budget, the ADA operating deficit result through November has swung to 2.8% favorable. This suggests that the action plan has had the intended effect on the financial results, and that the approved funding level will be sufficient to cover the year-end deficit. Any extra funding will be retained in the RTA's ADA paratransit reserve for future use. This new slide shows the growth in sales tax receipts through September 2025 compared to the prior year. As we discussed during the 2026 budget development process, the extension of local sales tax to more online purchases beginning January 1st, 2025 has produced significant year-over-year growth in RTA sales tax receipts, with the year-to-date receipts of $1.4 billion finishing 14.2% higher than 2024. This favorable public funding, combined with the service board's favorable expense performance, has helped preserve the COVID relief reserves. Please keep in mind that this is a one-year upward shift in sales tax receipts resulting from the expansion of the base. This step up is expected to continue through December, but beginning with the January 2026 results, sales tax growth should again reflect only changes in regional economic conditions. As a region through November, we've used $2.9 billion or 82% of the total COVID relief funding and related reserves that was allocated to the system. For the year to date, the service boards have used $464.2 million of these reserves, which is $307 million less than was budgeted, again, due to those strong sales tax receipts and the favorable operating results we just showed you. With that, that concludes my report. Back to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Sales tax numbers are pretty amazing. Yes, Director Gorman.
Thank you. Just real quick question. You said that a 2% expansion because it was expansion of the base. What does that consist of or?
So that was a law that went into effect on January 1. There's a pool of online transactions that was formerly subject to the use tax. It's now subject to our regional sales tax. So we're seeing a net increase, as you see, 14.2% for the year so far through September. That was the increase, yeah, due to the law change. Yep.
Everybody was spending at Christmas. All right, thank you, Sarah, very
you.
much. Item 7A is a resolution, and you all have it in front of you, honoring Director Yonan. John, we first really worked closely with him when he was President Preckwinkle and the county's transportation commissioner or director, but a true transportation professional who, not only his service here on our board greatly benefited riders, but even prior to that. Anybody want to add anything other than somebody needs to make a motion in a second that we adopt the resolution? If you're listening, John, thank you. You're the best. You're still around. And if you have suggestions for us, please never hesitate to call us or give us your suggestions. Liz, you were with him when you were on the county board.
I was with him at the county board, and then it was, really wonderful to work with John here at the RTA. It's a circle, and his knowledge was, super. And I think he'll be a great resource to us, even though he's not sitting on the board, but just in the future and transitioning into NETA. And I'm sure he wouldn't be, not to speak for John, but I'm sure he'd always be open, have that open door.
I'd also like to echo praises for John in working with President Preckwinkle and a lot of the activities in South Cook County. John was invaluable in terms of being a proponent for, on a broad scale, transportation for Northeast Illinois, and not just a specific area. So his being on the board has been a true asset, and he'll be missed. But as Liz said, he won't be far away.
Anybody else? If not, how about a motion that we adopted? Director Gorman moves, seconded by Director Lewis, that we adopt the resolution honoring John Yonan for his tremendous service to our board and beyond. And with that, Joey, I'm going to take a quick roll call.
Sure. Director Alvarez, Dr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Colson. Dr. Gorman. Aye. Dr. Groven.
Aye.
Dr. Jenkins. Dr. Tarek.
Aye.
Dr. Lewis.
Yes.
Dr. Mondero.
Emphatic yes.
Dr. Rotundo.
Yes.
Dr. Ross.
Yes.
Dr. Ryan.
Yes.
Sager. Dr. Sunoika.
Aye.
Dr. Walker.
Aye.
And Chairman Dillard.
Yes, and thank you very much,
14.
John and Joey. Get me that resolution so we can present it to him, so his children, grandchildren can see it. Item 7B, our travel expenses. Is there any questions on that? If not, how about a motion in a second? We approve. Director Rotundo moves that we approve 7B, seconded by Director Walker. Joey, want to take a quick roll call on that one?
Dr. Alvarez. Dr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Colson.
Aye.
Dr. Gorman.
Aye.
Dr. Groven.
Aye.
Dr. Jenkins.
Aye.
Tarek.
Aye.
Dr. Lewis.
Oh, yes.
Dr. Mondero.
Yes.
Dr. Rotundo.
Yes.
Dr. Ross.
Yes.
Dr. Ryan.
Yes.
Sager. Dr. Sunoika.
Aye.
Dr. Walker.
Yes.
And Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
14 ayes.
That is approved. Item 8 is new business. Any new business to come before us today? Our next meeting will be February 19th at 9 a.m. Here. And we have an executive session today. So I'll ask the secretary or Allison to read the exceptions.
Allison's downstairs. I will go ahead and read the exceptions. Pursuant to sections 2C8, 2C11, and 2C21 of the Open Meetings Act, the board may now vote to move into and adjourn from executive session, discuss matters related to safety and security, litigation, and docket review.
Great, thank you. Any questions there? If there's no further business to come before the board, the public session of the Board of Directors, I'll entertain a motion and a second to move into executive session, and then we'll adjourn the board meeting from the executive session, so we won't be back here for further business. Director Kotarik moves, seconded by Director Walker, that we resolve ourselves into executive session and adjourn after that. Madam Secretary, take a roll call, please.
Dr. Alvarez, Dr. Carey,
Aye.
Dr. Colson, Dr. Gorman. Aye. Dr. Groven,
Aye.
Dr. Jenkins,
Aye.
Howard,
Aye.
Dr. Lewis,
Yes.
Dr. Mondero,
Here.
Dr. Rotundo,
Yes.
Dr. Ross,
Yes.
Dr. Ryan,
Yes.
Dr. Sager, Dr. Slonika,
Yes.
Dr. Walker,
Yes.
and Chairman Dillon.
Yes,
49.
we're going to go to executive session. Thank you, everyone.